Your home is there. Your friends are there. It's your town. And then new people move in.
I don't want to come off as prejudiced, because I'm not prejudiced by no means. I'm not, you know.
Who don't look like you or talk like you.
These people have the feeling that if you don't look like me, I don't really like you that much.
And sometimes they feel as if you don't like them much either.
They don't really expect to fit in perfectly anyway. So they just try to manage and hope for a better future for their children, which is the main reason they came to the United States anyway.
Tonight, new faces on Main Street. One of the central ideas behind the growth of this country has been the great American melting pot. The notion that successive waves of immigrants come here from around the world, blend in with everyone else, and become Americans. In fact, it hasn't worked out that way, or at least not that smoothly. Each wave of immigrants has tended to view the next wave as intruders, not as educated or hardworking, and certainly not good for property values. They may become American, but not without a struggle. There's a small town in New Jersey called Palisades Park where it is happening all over again. After years of dominance, Irish and Italian Americans there have got some new neighbors from Guatemala and Korea. And one of the fascinating lessons of Palisades Park is that sometimes the only thing harder than having to deal with newcomers who are too poor is having to deal with some who are too successful. Nightline's Michelle McQueen on the melting pot that isn't.
This is Palisades Park. But it could be any small town in America. There's a Main Street. Here it's Broad Avenue. A swim club. A parade every now and again. And a big turnout for the high school graduation. But about 10 years ago, this little town in northern New Jersey started to change.
And it started with a group of 10, and then eventually mushroomed to a group of several hundred, all waiting on corners for contractors to pick them up every day.
They'll make comments and they'll stand in front of you, they want you to let you pass sometimes. It depends, not everyone, but there's a bunch that will do that.
Yeah, that's been a problem here.
Yeah.
And a lot of people resent them.
Really? What do you feel about them, the day laborers?
I don't have a problem with it. I have a problem as a homeowner having 50, 70 men on one corner waiting for work.
Nobody remembers how or why men from a few villages in Guatemala started migrating to this particular town. But Elizabeth Lorente, who covers immigration for The Record, figured out why they kept coming.
They started sending word back to the hinterlands of Guatemala that here was a place where if you were willing to work hard, you could stand in the shadows of immigration law, you could stand in the corner and get work.
This young man, who agreed to talk to us if he didn't show his face, told us he followed his brother here 4 months ago.
¿Cuánto? 500 al mes. I'm able to send about $500 a month back home.
The men worked long hours and tried to stay out of the way, but there were too many of them to go unnoticed, and many residents did not like what they saw.
They go to the bathroom out on the street.
Is that true?
It's totally disgusting.
Really? You've seen this?
Have you seen it? You see it all over the walls. I'm afraid to walk down one avenue in my town.
There followed the predictable uproar, demands for a crackdown, followed by complaints of police harassment, angry letters to the newspapers, political fallout.
This came as a shock to this town, which is only a square mile, has 15,000 people, and had long been the domain of Irish and Italian Americans.
But in many ways, it was merely history repeating itself.
We've always reflected the waves of immigrants out of New York City.
Frank Patty is the town historian.
The Italians came early on at the turn of the century. The Irish and German came a little before that. So I think if you look at Palisades Park's growth, you'll see that it's tied to the streets of Lower Manhattan, because as people became more affluent and they wanted a better life for their family, the first stop was the East Bergen County area, particularly Palisades Park.
For example, Korean families also started moving in and buying small shops on Broad Avenue. And as the Guatemalans settled in, something interesting happened, town people say. What started as anger and fear turned into something like recognition and respect. The original residents started to see something familiar in the men, something that reminded the old-timers of their struggle to make it in America.
I think the old-timers, considering when they came over, they came as a group. I think they've taken to these people that came after them.
Sandy Farber is the mayor of Palisades Park.
And they're very good people. They work very, very hard, and it's tough.
And while the town was arriving at something like a truce with the Guatemalan men, something else started to change. The trickle of Korean families became a wave. Like the Guatemalans before them, they looked at Broad Avenue and saw an opportunity.
The Koreans in New York learned about Palisades Park because it's close to highways, and many of them live in Manhattan or worked in Manhattan. And real estate agencies started advertising Palisades Park as the place to come to in Korean newspapers, both in New York and Queens and also in Seoul.
Koreans bought a carpet store, then a restaurant, then another restaurant, and then the pizza parlor was gone, and then the Italian butcher, and the 5 and 10.
And then the things that people identified with little by little were disappearing. And so when it got to be enough of those experiences, and when enough people in town started having those reactions, that's where the tension started shifting.
To shift, in other words, to the new newcomers, and the people who made the old-timers uncomfortable, the subject of meetings and tense talk at the swim club, were no longer the brown men with calloused hands waiting on the street corner. It was the Korean men and women in business suits, and they owned the corner.
As a nation, we pride ourselves on welcoming immigrants, but we want them to be American and to speak like Americans as soon as possible. When they don't, especially when they're not downtrodden, the usual native versus newcomer tensions get turned upside down, as we'll see in part 2 of Michelle McQueen's report when we return.
As in a lot of small towns around the country, downtown Palisades Park, the center of town, was dying.
There were a lot of abandoned storefronts. The Koreans arrived and looked down Broad Avenue and saw a pathway to the American dream.
To the newcomers, it was, if not a welcome mat, at least an open door. But to the old-timers, this American dream looked different. This is you?
Yeah, I'm carrying the Veteran of Foreign Wars flag.
Okay.
Yep.
You're not trying to hide back there,
No,
are you?
it's-
Tom Albanese has lived in Palisades Park since he was 2.
The immigrants that we're familiar with that came to Ellis Island, they came here because they wanted to come here for a new life. These people, Koreans, came here to make a new life better for themselves. They come here with money, big investments.
True or not, many people we spoke with in Palisades Park believe the town has gone Korean. But according to a report by the County Human Relations Commission, 16% of the town's 15,000 residents are Hispanic. 30% are Korean. A majority is white. But Koreans do own 90% of the town's 200 businesses. And to the old-timers, it seemed as if the Koreans were setting up their own town within the town. The Koreans founded a Korean PTA and Korean sports teams. They revived the dormant Chamber of Commerce and held the meetings in Korean, just to save time, they said, since the members are mostly Korean.
I go to shop there, they raise the prices for us. But
And then the rumors started that the Koreans refused to serve non-Koreans, that they were only pretending they couldn't speak English, that their stores had 2 sets of prices, higher ones for non-Koreans.
A friend of mine who's a teacher speaks Korean and reads it, but she spoke English and said, how much is this? And they gave her one price, and then when she read the bottom of the paper in Korean, it was higher price.
Was higher price?
Yeah, and they'll tell you, if you want to buy something, send a friend in who's Korean.
Whether any of that is true or not, the anger boiled over. Some Korean-owned stores were pelted with eggs and tomatoes. No one was arrested, but one thing became clear. Many longtime residents felt that Palisades Park was not their town anymore.
Everyone knew each other today. You could go through town, you don't know anybody.
You don't know anybody.
Hardly. All people that I've known and grown up with have moved out.
It has changed.
Well, let me ask you this. Is it the fact that the people who've moved in are of a different race, different ethnicity? Is that part of why it feels different?
Maybe, but it doesn't bother me that it is. You know, there's a lot of Spanish, there's a lot of Korean, more Korean, I guess.
Like she said, they don't mingle, like they don't try to, maybe it's because it's the language barrier. Like a lot of them still don't speak English, you know, and they feel like they have to keep to themselves. But
have you tried to reach
yeah,
out
to
to them?
Yeah.
I mean, have you tried, to go over with the, I don't know, bottle of wine or pound cake or something? I don't know. Have you really?
Well, yeah, kind of. We did. I had a neighbor that was Korean, used to play with the kids, and it was just hello, how are you, and that was it.
Most people here do acknowledge that Korean businesses have stabilized the town's economic base. Officials estimate that fully half of the town's tax revenue, $21 million, comes from Korean businesses and residents. But only a fraction of Korean residents are eligible to vote, which might help explain the ordinances, all adopted in the last 3 years. Among them, store signs were required to be at least 50% English language. Stores were required to close between 12 and 6 a.m. Most restaurants between 3 and 6 a.m. In fact, if any one thing serves as a symbol of the conflict between the old residents and the new, it is the fight over closing times for the karaoke bars. To the Koreans, who prefer to call them music studios, they are a part of the culture, a way to let off steam after a long day, perfectly innocent, especially since they don't serve alcohol. The law says they must close at 1 a.m. But the All-American Diner, which does serve alcohol, can stay open all night.
We are not a 24-hour-a-day town. We do not wish to have Palisade Park to be the Las Vegas of the East.
To the Korean businessmen, some of whom have been fined thousands of dollars for closing late, it's about respect for their culture and for their contribution to the town.
I'm very sad and I'm angry. I don't know what to do.
I was told that the Korean was the right race to be targeted.
When I came 15 years ago, when I came to this country is a freedom country. It's a very nice country. When I came to Palisade Park, I find out no.
Even some Koreans who don't patronize the studios, like this local clergyman, see tinges of racism in the karaoke battle.
Do I want a business that goes on for 24 hours, which is toward entertainment? Personally, no, I don't. Okay, but when it involves my ethnic community, that brings a total different feeling. I feel my people are getting oppressed by the local government.
But the mayor and many other old-timers insist the Koreans have only themselves to blame by thinking of their community first and the rest of the town second.
They do not come to mayor and council meetings. We have 150 volunteer ambulance and fire department people. We only have one Korean who has volunteered, youngster. We'd like to see more of that. I constantly am saying, why don't the Korean community respond to that?
The whole civic life is very different in Korea. In Korea, what citizens expect to do, you work hard, pay tax, and for the election for the Congress or the president, they vote. That's about it. But, of course, in America, it's very different.
As is so often the case in a small town, the political became personal. Things got so bad between the mayor and the businessmen that the mayor refused to show up at a Harmony picnic last July, although it was his idea. But those who take the long view see it another way, as growing pains, another chapter in the saga of the town. It's about change and growth. It's an American story.
I feel a sense of continuity. I feel a sense that we're experiencing what people 20 years, 40 years, 6 generations have experienced. I think Palisades Park will always reflect that trend as all this area, because we are the gateway to America.
How the next generation sees the uneasy truce between old-timers and new immigrants when we return with part 3 of Michelle McQueen's report in a moment.